Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to TED Talks Ball. We've got a special Wednesday afternoon edition, a special Behind Enemy Lines edition. Those of you who were with us last week know that Anthony came on last week to do a preview show before the NFC Championship game, and he's been gracious enough to come and join us again for a recap as well. So, and you may know him on Twitter at Anthony Writer, the number 5, and also his handle there is WriterWrong. He's also WriterWrong on YouTube, and you can find the link to his YouTube channel in the description for the show here. So, Anthony, thanks for joining. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm starting to get over the Lions loss. We're 3 days removed, and it's starting to sting a little less. So,
understandably, yeah. I mean, I backstage, I was saying, I can only imagine how good Lions fans must have been feeling at halftime, because I was pretty down in the dumps. I hadn't given up all hope, but I knew that I was sort of hoping based on no evidence presented in the first half. It was based on just the whole season and what we had done against Green Bay. But obviously there was no evidence of a 17-point comeback in Kyle Shanahan's career for the 49ers. And only one other time it's happened in the NFC Championship, oddly enough, it was the Niners, and it was Cap against Matt Ryan when they went up. But even then, it was earlier in the game. They had gone up 17-0 against us early, and then Cap came back and beat them to send us to the Super Bowl to lose to the Ravens in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. But we got a few folks here in the audience. Let's say hi to people who are here. We got Carcast in the house saying yo. He says, "Are you a Chiefs podcaster?" No, he's a Lions podcaster. So that's why I got Lions there in the banner. And he was on last week. Anthony is a famous Lions fan. He was Lions fan of the year. It was 2022, right?
2020.
Sorry. And is that the same year where you guys picked Amon-Ra St. Brown? Or was that 2021?
Yep, that was 2020.
And Anthony famously read the card at the draft when they picked Amon-Ra St. Brown. So pretty damn cool to have sort of Lions royalty in the house with us. So yeah, indeed. And then we got Daniel Berry sports highlights in the house. He's a content creator as well. So is Carcast. Make sure you check out Carcast's channel. Give him a like, subscribe. Same thing with Daniel Berry. Although Daniel Berry is a Rams fan, but still pretty cool nonetheless. But yeah, so where should we kick things off today? I didn't really come up with a itinerary of topics or whatever, but I thought I'd let you just take the floor a little bit.
I mean, I'll just start off with the loss. Like you said, the Lions were kind of cooking in the first half. They were up 24-7. They were up 17 at the half. They were running the ball really well. Their defense was playing really well. We were pretty much on top of the world. And unfortunately, they came out in the third quarter. I think that third quarter is really what got us. The Niners came out and they drove down. They scored a touchdown, kind of swung momentum back a little bit in their favor. Obviously, the Lions would still be up at 10 by that point. The Lions drove down on offense. They were still moving. I mean, they still got down to I don't know exactly, but roughly the 30-yard line for that 4th and 2 conversion. I personally, in that moment, thought the Lions should have kicked the field goal on that one. I thought, going back up 17 or whatever by 3 scores would have been way better than kind of going for that knockout blow, right? I think if you go up by another 7, that really makes it tough on the Niners, but also that big risk is there of the momentum swing, where if you don't get it, like the Lions didn't, then, the 49ers have the chance to go back down the field and they score again, and then the fumble caused. And I think that moment, that 4th down conversion, is not what lost the Lions the game, but I think that was kind of the moment you can look at and be like, yeah, had the Lions scored even a field goal on that play and gone back up by 17 points, I think that changes and swings the momentum back in the Lions' favor just a little bit. And then obviously the Niners drive back down with a 3-point deficit instead of a 2-point deficit. And even if they scored, then they're still down by 2 scores. So I think that 4th down conversion, not that it was even a bad play call. Obviously, they just dropped it and the Lions didn't execute. I think that was kind of the big thing at the end of that game, and especially throughout the third and fourth quarter. Execution just wasn't good by the Detroit Lions. Like, Ben Johnson called plays and got guys open. Josh Reynolds dropped that fourth down pass. He had a different third down drop. Amon-Ra St. Brown, probably the most sure-handed guy in the league, drops a big pass on third down. Jahmyr Gibbs has his first fumble of his career in the NFC Championship game after, so the Niners can go back and tie it. It was just a bad execution thing. Like, they just didn't execute on offense, and Ben Johnson put them in positions to succeed. I would even say Jared Goff put guys in positions to succeed. He put the ball right on their chest, put the ball, right where they could get it, and it kept going off the hands. So it was a big execution thing. I think it honestly came down to those 4 big plays. It was that fourth down drop by Reynolds. It was the fumble by Jahmyr Gibbs. It was the ball that bounced off Kendall Vilder's face mask for a 50-yard reception by Brandon Ayuk somehow, some way. And then, by that point, that's a 14-17 point swing, and the 49ers have all of the momentum. And I think the moment that, at least for me as a Lions fan, I think a lot of Lions fans felt this way as well. Pretty much as soon as you knew the game was over is when, I think it was either really late in the third or really early in the fourth, when Aaron Glenn dialed up a blitz package with Ifeatu Melifonwu, and he came free from the line and he hit Brock Purdy in the backfield, and Brock Purdy bounced right off of it and threw a 10-yard pass to Kyle Juszczyk for a first down. Like, that was kind of the moment where you were like, it doesn't matter, right? Aaron Glenn could call the perfect play. He could dial it up with the 6'3" safety that has 4 sacks on the season and has done this numerous times throughout the last month and resulted in sacks. And, it didn't work. Brock Purdy bounced right off and threw it to a wide open Kyle Juszczyk on the sideline. I think that's kind of the moment we all were like, well, that pretty much sums up the second half of football for the Detroit Lions.
Maybe your DC should, Aaron Glenn, I think you just said his name is, should have dialed up a blitz with a shorter safety because Brock kind of ducked under and got away. You just mentioned he's 6'3". Brock's only they list him as 6'1", but let's be honest, he's like 6'1.5". Yeah. They round up for him a little bit there. That was a huge play for sure. The one to Jennings was huge. It's really interesting. Like, through talking to you and Ash, and there was a third content creator for the Lions that I spoke with last week, and I'm blanking right now. I'll have to go back through and take a look. I got a lot of great knowledge. I will say it really helped me in writing my preview article, which I feel like I really nailed. I was saying basically like that, obviously both teams have really good run games, but that the Lions have a really good run defense. And that, there's a lot of things similar about the teams. Neither of us trust our quarterbacks in sort of foul weather type of situation. That obviously the Lions have a great offensive line. But as you mentioned, I think it was backstage though, you mentioned, Kendall Vildor as one of your starting corners is not a recipe for success. Cam Sutton, let's face it, is not like a ton better either. I mean, he's not like a great corner either. So like, that's what I said in my article was basically like all things equal in this game. Well, first of all, I said, if we can pressure Goff and stop the run, we should run away with it. But that's easier said than done with the Lions offensive line, even without Jonah Jackson and even with Ragnow banged up, because Ragnow always plays banged up. And so, it's just kind of interesting. It was, Devoted to Detroit was the other content creator I was trying to think of. And you guys were all so helpful and so knowledgeable. It was really awesome. But yeah, so I said all things equal, like assuming that we can't stop the run very well and can't pressure Goff very well, which we didn't until late in the game. I said, I trust, just kind of like we were saying, Debo, Ayuk, and Jennings against Sutton and Vildor. And then, I trust Brock Purdy a little bit more than Jared Goff. And you're saying that he hit, there were some drops, but some of those passes too, like when we pressured Goff, you could tell his accuracy. A little bit. There's a little close can kind of be true. I think it was probably more drops than Goff, because people like to beat up Goff, but he's obviously a really good, but you could see in the stats, like how he is with a clean pocket, which is like, he'll hurt you bad compared to with pressure. he's then kind of a little bit less than average a lot of times. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, as far as the momentum goes with the 4th and 2, it was interesting because I turned to my buddy I was watching the game with. I'm like, you know what's funny? Right before, I was like, Campbell's going to go for it here. I know. And one of the things I said, in my article was Dan Campbell might be well advised to not go for it quite as much as he likes to normally, because having success doing that all year against basically average NFL defenses, right? If you're looking at a whole season worth of games, is not the same as the success you'll probably have against the 49ers defense, which wasn't great, but definitely better than average. So when you guys went to go for it on 4th and 2, I turned to my buddy and I was just like, you know what? I trust us more on 4th and 2 than I do on like 3rd and 14. How freaking weird is that? And sure enough, it's true. And then a lot of people want to play this game though, where they're like, oh well, if Campbell had just kicked 2 field goals, they'd have 6 more points, they would have won the game. And obviously things always happen differently once one thing happens. But the other thing that happens differently, as I mentioned in my article, was that neither of our teams trusted our place kickers. And Badgley was actually perfect in the game, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
But I mean, I think they were mostly pretty close in. I don't think there were any long field goals, and I think at least one of those 4th downs would have been a long field goal. So I'm not like willing to say that 2 kicks equals 6 points for Michael Badgley. I would say maybe more like 3 to 6. I don't think he would miss both, obviously. But anyway, that's just one thing. Like where I kind of like when people are beating up Dan Campbell, I was like, kind of defending him a little bit in that respect. And that like I don't think those field goals were sure things.
Yeah.
At least not as sure as most NFL teams.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Moody missed a kick right before the half, and it's pretty wild the way all that stuff went down. But yeah, I was really surprised to see Brock Purdy do so much with his legs all off season. I was bemoaning him as being limited arm, limited height, limited top speed, and all those things are still true. But this season, he's really gotten better at deep passes and deep runs. When he used to run with the ball, I don't think he ever got more than 10 yards last season. And this season, he started to get some longer runs and obviously uncorked a few against you guys. And so I said, I just wish he had one elite trait besides quickness. He has the same quickness as CMC, which is elite, but none of his other physical traits. And I still kind of feel that way, but it seems like more and more he's learning how to get those longer runs and longer passes despite his limitations, which is pretty awesome to see.
Yeah.
Got some Rick's been busy over here. He was saying that his friends and he had predicted this last year, so that's kind of interesting. Anyway, but let me let you run with it for a little bit here, since I kind of was.
Yeah, no worries. I think like you were saying, I think the biggest difference between Purdy and Goff in this game was that Purdy had 52 rushing yards and Goff did not. Right? I mean, he had 3 rushes and they were all 3 for first downs in huge, crucial moments. And even with all of the execution errors that they had in the game, they had a chance to get back into it. I think they were down by 3. They had like a 3rd and 7 or something, and they pressured Brock Purdy, and Brock Purdy stepped up in the pocket, had a good angle on Alex Anzalone, and picked up a first down to put them within the red zone, and then CMC finished it off. But I think Brock Purdy's quickness, like you said, was really impactful in that game, but his ability to just scramble, his ability to make plays with his feet, I think is, the one thing that elevated him above Goff in this game. I didn't think either played particularly well. I wouldn't look at either Purdy or Goff from that game and be like, that was an elite performance by the quarterback, but Brock Purdy made plays when it mattered. And I think Brock Purdy was able to scramble and extend some plays in a way that Jared Goff couldn't. And I think that's, part of the reason that the 49ers were able to win that game. I mentioned the 4th downs earlier. I wanted them to kick that first one, but at the same time, when that's your philosophy, when that's what got you to the NFC Championship, when that is your whole identity, you live and die by the sword, right? And it wasn't even a bad play call. I mean, Josh Reynolds got open. Jared Goff hit him in the hands. For a guy that's been really reliable for the Lions all year, if you were to ask me on a 4th down conversion, if one guy had a yard of separation and who's making the tough catch, I would go Amon-Ra St. Brown. And the second guy I'd say is Josh Reynolds. He's had super big catches all year. He's had super reliable all year. He very rarely ever drops the football, even though it clearly didn't look like that on Sunday night. If you're asking the Lions fans, like, who do you go to for a big clutch play, right? Amon-Ra's doubled. They go to Josh Reynolds. That's who they've been going to. That's who their clutch guy is. And it's just an execution thing more so than I think even a poor decision or a poor play call.
Yeah, and not just all year, but look at the 2 playoff games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like the beginning of the Rams games, it was like Goff to Reynolds, Goff to Reynolds, Goff
Mm-hmm.
to Reynolds. It was just like over and over again. And he was pretty big against the Bucs too, if I recall.
Yeah, he had a big touchdown in that game to help put them up even more. So, I mean, he's been super reliable all playoffs. There was a stat, I think, even going into like week 12 of the season, that every catch that Josh Reynolds had was either a first down or a touchdown. And it was at like 30, 40 catches or something like that. Like it was fairly impressive. He's been so good for us all year that I don't blame the play call. I think it was the right play call. I think I would even argue it was the right decision because they got the matchup that they liked. They got the separation. Jared got the ball off. Like everything worked until, the ball just fell to the ground. And that I think really flipped momentum. The second one, I was more okay going for. That one was probably going to be closer to a 45, 50-yard field goal. That one would have been pushing Badgley's range a little bit. So 4th and 2, I didn't mind it at all. I thought maybe they would have a better design for it. And I think that Javon Kinlaw really blew that play up. He kind of got past Owaska at left guard and really pressured Jared Goff out to his right, which I think obviously threw off timing and threw out routes and stuff like that. Again, I liked the decision when they decided to go for it, but it was an execution thing, right? The left guard just lost his battle to a really good defensive tackle. He was able to force Jared Goff out, and the ball came up super short. But I don't look at too many plays from that game where I'm like, that was a bad coaching decision, right? I don't look at too many plays in that game, and I don't come away with like Dan Campbell sold that game or Ben Johnson sold that game or even Aaron Glenn, who I have had so many issues with over the season. I didn't even look at that. And I was like, yeah, they gave up 27 in the second half, but like, look at how they did it, right? I mean, that ball bounced off Kendall Vilder's face. The offense fumbled the ball in the red zone like 4 plays later. The defense didn't even do anything particularly that wrong until I would say about the 4th quarter where Brock Purdy started to scramble. That's the one thing I'd look at and say that's what the Lions schematically really lost to the 49ers at. But like, you look at the rest of the defense and it's like, yeah, they gave up 27, but that 50-yard play to Ayuk was really fluky. The fumble that set them up in the red zone was, not on the defense. Best case scenario, they're giving up 3 and they happen to give up 7 because CMC is really good in the red zone. Like, so that's 14 that they spotted. And it just felt like it, like I said, like the Ifiatu play, it just felt like it was more of an execution thing where it's like the coaches were calling the right plays, the guys were getting open, the guys were getting good looks. And it just seemed like some kind of weird voodoo magic that every time the Lions were in position to do something good, they just couldn't do it. And, even at the end of that game, they were down by 10 with like 4 minutes left and they drove down the field. And Anthony Frisker, for some reason, somehow with like 10 yards of space around him, when he catches the ball, steps out at the 2 instead of fighting his way into the end zone, which I've watched that play several times and I don't understand how you can't turn a little quicker to get there. And I think that leads to the one actual coaching decision that I dislike, which I have a hard time, really hating, because at the time I was like, run the ball with David Montgomery because he's going to get in. He's a great running back. You have a great offensive line. You're at the 1. Obviously that didn't work out on 3rd down and that ended up wasting a timeout, which eventually, hurt the Detroit Lions down the stretch a little bit there. But, they scored a touchdown with, I think, 53 seconds left, something like that. Jameson Williams had a great day. I think he's really a guy to watch for next year for the Detroit Lions. Just another weapon added, finally getting some chemistry with Goff. And finally, I think getting a lot of confidence with Jared Goff. I know earlier in the season, he had a lot of drop issues, which I think really hurt his confidence, but he hasn't had a drop since like week 7. Made a couple really impressive catches and obviously had that big end around. He's got explosive speed. And then, I think at the end of the game, JMO gets that big touchdown in the end zone. They go out for that onside kick. And again, they kick the ball. It bounces up. It looks really good for the Lions for a second. It hits, I think, Malcolm Rodriguez right in the hands, a quarter of a yard short of that 10-yard mark, and bounces off to George Kittle, and he picks it up, and it's game. Like, there were, I think, just so many opportunities for the Lions to win that game. And I think the coaches were really good in that game. And honestly, when I did my recap video, like, I went through all the box scores, I went through all the coaching decisions, and like, if you described it to somebody without saying the score, if you described it without saying the score, you could probably make the argument that the Lions won that game, and I don't think anybody would bat an eye. But
I mean,
at
in
the
a
end of the day,
3-point game, yeah,
missed
absolutely.
tackles and, just like seriously down to like quarter yards and like a couple inches here and there. And it was the big difference in the game.
I'll tell you a couple inches. There was where you guys almost downed it on our 1-yard line.
Yep, that's another play where,
your guy just
his
stepped in.
heel steps in the end zone, and then it goes from being at the 1 to being at the 20, which again was a big momentum thing that, hey, the Lions could have had you backed up at the 1 with their great rushing defense, potentially for a safety. And at the 20, obviously your options are a little bit more expandable.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Silly fun guy in the house. He usually brings good dad jokes. They're not always funny, but they're usually punny. He says, what do you call it when Batman skips church? A Christian Bale. Wah, wah, wah. Anyway, welcome, Silly Fun Guy. He's a Rams fan, but he's cool. All good. Even though this is a Niners channel, we welcome all kinds of opinions here. We don't want to just have like an echo chamber. Everybody's like, oh, you're great. You're great. No, and we want to hear if you disagree, and tell us. Yeah, no, I mean, and I kind of agree that Goff and Purdy had similar games. Just Goff was hot early, Purdy was hot late. Mm-hmm. And a lot of why Purdy was hot was his running. Eventually, you guys started to spy him. And once you spy a quarterback, that just is one less set of eyes on our weapons covering. Mm-hmm. As one of the things I was bemoaning about, being a Lance guy, that I was bemoaning about Purdy in the offseason was doesn't throw deep and doesn't run deep. And both of those things take a guy out of the box. If you throw deep with effectively, you have to play back 2 safeties back out of the box. And then if you run effectively, you have to have one of the guys that's still left in the box not paying attention to the people in the box, so just with their eyes on the quarterback, waiting for him to move or not. And I never imagined that Brock Purdy would throw deep so well or run long runs as well as he has, but he definitely proved me wrong, and I couldn't be happy. I always say I'd rather be happy than right, and he's made me very happy. Interesting stuff. As far as now, obviously you guys got some good news this week, though. Ben Johnson's staying, so that's great news for the Lions, and so is your DC guy. I just blanked on his name again.
Aaron Glenn is almost guaranteed. I think he's still technically up for the Washington job, but it doesn't seem like he's a heavy favorite necessarily.
Sound like they were looking at Dan Quinn also.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. So both coordinators are probably returning, which is, big in itself, right? Because obviously they know the systems that they've been running. They've been building it for 2 to 3 years. But I think it has, and I have a video going out about this in about 30 minutes. I think it kind of has that snowball effect where it's like, okay, now your coordinators are back, which is big, but then that means that they're not going to steal your linebackers coach, right? That means they're not going to steal your quarterbacks coach or your offensive line coach, which I think is almost as big as Ben Johnson, because like Hank Fairley is probably the best offensive line coach in the NFL right now. Mark Brunell has done wonders for Jared Goff as the quarterback coach. Scotty Montgomery, who they brought in last year, has been really big for the running backs for both Gibbs and Montgomery, having huge seasons under him for his first season. Antoine Randall L, I know, is getting offensive coordinator looks for the Buccaneers right now, and he's been a really good job with the wide receivers in the building as the wide receivers coach. So there's still an opportunity for the Lions to lose a couple of those guys. Like I said, Antoine Randall L is interviewing for OC right now with the Bucs. And then Tanner Engstrom, the pass game coordinator for the Lions, who I know works very close with Ben Johnson. has interviewed with both the Patriots and the Buccaneers for the offensive coordinator position. So it could still end up losing a couple of key guys. I think both of them would very much be I think they'd be very good offensive coordinators, especially Engstrom. So it might not be perfect. They might not run it back 100%, but I think the damage has been minimized as far as losing quality coaches, which I think is big for a team that's looking to, kind of reload, add a couple pieces, and really give it another good shot at a Super Bowl.
There you go. Yeah, I think you guys have every reason to be optimistic about that. Great, solid young core and room for growth for sure. Team Cali was saying, perhaps I'm biased, but KC is not winning the Super Bowl. Have you given much thought to the Super Bowl matchup between the Niners and the Chiefs?
Yeah, I have. I've been somebody who's doubted the Chiefs for pretty much the whole playoffs. I thought they were going to beat Miami, but I didn't necessarily think they were going to go into like Baltimore and win. I didn't necessarily think they were going to. I'm trying to think who they played in the second round. They played
Buffalo,
Miami.
the Bills.
I didn't necessarily think they were going to go into Buffalo and win. I definitely didn't think they were going to go into Baltimore and win, but they've proved me wrong a couple of times already this year. I think they're pretty good. I think it's really hard to bet against Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes at the quarterback, with, Travis Kelce looking 15 years younger in the playoffs for whatever reason. Rashid Rice is coming along really well, and he's been super impactful. Pacheco's really good. Their offensive line solid. Their defense is, really, really high quality with, Snead in the back, and Chris Jones is really good, and Nick Bolton's really good. So I think it's going to be a really close game. I think, honestly, I would almost lean more towards it being a defensive battle just because of all the key defensive pieces on both sides of the football. Obviously the Niners have like Bosa, and they have Young, and they have Warner and Greenlaw and all those guys. I think the Chiefs can match up really well. Chris Jones, I think, can be a game wrecker. Snead's really good as a DB on the boundary. He's been taking guys away all year. I go back and forth on it. Again, I think it's really hard to bet against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback, the best head coach in the NFL at this point. But I think I think at this point it's kind of just a coin flip. I think it just depends who shows up on that day. As a Lions fan speaking, I think I can say, anybody can have a bad game at this point in the season, right? If you don't show up, if you don't bring your A game, even if you've had a great season, a couple of plays here and there could absolutely ruin your Super Bowl chances. So I think it's just going to depend who executes better on Sunday.
Yeah, get out of my head, Anthony. I've been saying coin flip. Kind of Vegas has too, let's be honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
It started at 1.5, dropped to 1 point, then it went back to 1.5, and then yesterday when I checked, it was up to 2 points that were favored by, and let's just see what we're at now. It's still holding steady at 2.0, which is not a lot. Let's be honest, it's just a smidge. But yeah, it's very different than 2019 when we played the Chiefs. In fact, I'm calling it a revenge game, but the guys were there to get revenge on is pretty thin of who's left.
It's like 4 or 5 guys.
It's Andy Reid, it's Mahomes, it's Chris
Kelce.
Jones, who you mentioned, Kelce, and that's it. There's nobody else. I'm pretty sure Butker wasn't there yet, and their punter neither.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then on the Niners side, we have a little more crossover with Bosa, Armstead, Fred, Dre on defense, and then on offense, obviously, it's pretty thin there too. It's basically just Debo and Kittle, and Juice check.
Was Williams not there yet?
No, Trent Williams.
Oh, really?
Staley retired right after the Super Bowl, and
Hmm.
we traded for Trent Williams during the next draft.
Gotcha.
A third and a fifth. We traded for
Mhm.
Trent Williams. If you
Pretty
can
good.
believe that. And yeah, we've gotten over pretty well on the Commanders and our trades with them, because we got Chase Young for a comp third, which we expect to get back for him even if he walks. So
Yeah,
he hasn't been huge for us, but he definitely had at least 3 nice plays against you guys on
Mhm.
Sunday. Yeah, I think, I probably said something last week about our D-line being overpaid and overrated, and they kind of have been for a while. However, of course, then Bosa shows up big time in the game, especially late in the game, and made me eat my words. He was the highest graded defender per PFF over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I said all along, like, hey, if he's going to pick a time to show up, like, now's the time. NFC Championship and Super Bowl. Be the time. He held out, and he only had like literally 2 practices before the Steelers game to open the season at I can still call it Heinz Field, Acrisure, whatever they're calling it these days.
It's Heinz Field.
Yeah, Heinz Field, exactly. And so he's been kind of playing catch up all season. Catch up. Hey. Sorry. Anyway, he started looking about, like you said, Kinlaw looked pretty good in the game. And who just still we're still waiting on, though, is Hargrave. He just really hasn't really played up to his $19 million contract yet. Maybe he won't. I don't know. We're starting to run out of time here, but I guess he has more time because it's a multi-year deal. So it's not like we'll probably get rid of him. I doubt this year, but Team Cali was saying this is the weakest I've seen the KC Mahomes at the helm. The 49ers is different, and quite frankly, they're too much for KC. I mean, this is the weakest their offense has been, because it's just Kelsey and Rice and Pacheco, essentially. Yeah. I guess you still have to remember MVS, especially because
if he can catch the ball.
The last couple of games, right? If he can catch the ball, which he didn't all season, but then the last 2 games against the Bills and the Ravens, he had big catches at the end to kind of ice the games. So it's made me worry about him a little bit more than before. But yeah, their offense is definitely weaker. They also lost Thuney against Joe Thuney, their all-pro left guard, against the Ravens, and Allegretti filled in for him and did pretty well. But, it's the way it is with backups. Like, sometimes they'll play well for a game, but I think over a period of time, they'll start to show why they're the backup and not an all-pro, let alone a starter. So that'll be interesting to watch, because really the strength of that Chiefs O-line is their interior O-line, Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith, and their tackles are kind of not quite so good. Yeah, so that could hurt them. They also lost Charles Omenihu in the AFC Championship game. We know him well. He did a lot of good stuff here. We got him from the Texans, and then he played well for the Niners, and then got $10 million from the Chiefs, so it was more than we could afford to pay him. So he's out with an ACL. I don't know if Thuney's out for sure, but they sounded pretty doubtful. He tore his pec, so that's hard to come back from. And just
that took CJ Gardner-Johnson like 4 months to come back from. So I would assume
there's different levels. Like, if you don't because TJ Watt had it, right, and I think he was out like 8 games, 7 games, something like that. Depends if you have to get surgery or not or whatever. I mean, to come back in 3-4 weeks, I think is probably unrealistic. But we'll see. I don't want to say that he's out when he hasn't been ruled out.
Right.
So the Chiefs' offense is beatable, but their defense is amazing. Like, it's kind of like they flipped the script from last time, because last Super Bowl when we played them, their offense was amazing, and their defense was kind of like came on towards the end of the season, but they went from 18th to 10th in the league, right? Oh, they were never like a top 5 D like the Niners D was back then, and now the Niners D has slipped some, and we're the number 1 offense DVOA, and so it's just kind of interesting that the tables have turned a little bit, but ultimately we're still very evenly balanced. And I think all things equal, you kind of said it, you never bet against Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I probably will. But that's probably just me being a homer a little bit, or hopeful, betting with my heart instead of my head. And I don't really bet on my team anyway, but picking my team, I should say. I mean, and obviously they have Harrison Butker, as we already mentioned, who's a very good place kicker. So that's another big advantage over Jake Moody, who's just, I don't know if I said this to you last week, but one of our creators early in the season had a great one where they were like, another definition for Moody is unpredictable. And and that's pretty much what he's been. He was obviously fine in the second half, just like the rest of the team. Nobody could get it going in the first half, and everything was clicking in the second half.
Mhm.
But I'd be lying if I said I'd feel real confident in needing him to kick a game winner. Although somebody posted on the timeline like, oh, 8 seconds left, ball on the 40-yard line, down by 2 to the Chiefs. How are you feeling? And like, yeah, I'm nervous that Moody's going to win, but if I'm saying I think the game's a coin flip, I like Moody better than a coin flip to make that field goal. So I think I'm feeling better than I came into the game, honestly.
That's fair.
Yeah. So, which is weird to think. The only thing is he hasn't really kicked a game winner. Right. So that's very different. So then I don't know what his percentage is on those. And you gotta assume the pressure would make it worse than whatever his, season average is from that distance or whatever. But so I thought it was kind of interesting when the guy was clearly trying to like get people's goat to like say like, oh, the sky's falling if we're going to count Jake Moody. I'm kind of like, yeah, I like that better than like trying to stop Mahomes, with time on the clock.
Right. With a minute left. Yeah.
A minute left. Yeah, exactly. So, because you know how he is in that situation. Dave McNiner in the house. He has a channel. Make sure you check him out. He says, what's good, Ted? Let's F and go 49ers. Let's go. Got Stevo Supremo in the house. Says you guys should pod other more good duo. Hey, pretty much everybody I have on has an open invitation to come back anytime, as long as we get along. It's kind of funny. This happened. I invited this guy, let's see, the Man Cave 10, and it was before the Bengals, and somebody had referred me to him as a Bengals content creator because he works with a Bengals content creator. So like we set up the show and we're about to go on. He's like, oh, my buddy, the Bengals guy can't make it. And I'm like, oh. It's like, yeah, I'm a Browns guy. I'm like, I don't care, whatever. It's a different view. As long as it's outside the Niners fishbowl, I want to hear what people think of us that aren't 49ers fans. And so he came on the show and everybody's like, oh, good duo. You guys should do more. And next thing you know, we're doing a show every Thursday and we call it Faithful Dogs. Like I'm obviously the faithful part, Cleveland, the dog pound dogs. And so it's funny how those things work. Anyway, I don't want to put any pressure on you on air, but it's kind of true for most anybody I have on. If we get along well, you're always welcome to come back. So see Stevo, thanks Stevo, appreciate it. We got Edgar Scully saying, hey bro, it's Ted and guess going to number 6. Well, we got our chance to win number 6 to get revenge on the Chiefs. It's funny, I said last week, I don't know if I said it to you, Anthony, when you were on, but I was expecting the Ravens to win, but I was rooting for the Chiefs because I wanted revenge. Either way, it was going to be a shot at revenge, but there's nobody left from the Ravens other than John Harbaugh from when Flacco beat us in 2012.
Right.
Yep. Whereas with the Chiefs, there's obviously people we mentioned, but mainly it's Mahomes. Everybody wants to beat Mahomes. And even if we have a lower chance of winning against them, it's the greater chance of feeling fulfilled by doing it. And also kind of like, you always, there's that saying like, you got to beat the best to be the best. And so, anyway, we'll see what happens. It's careful what you wish for type of thing, I guess. So we'll see if we end up losing, people can lord it over me like, Ted, you asked for it and you got it, and damn it. But what are you going to do? Edgar Scully here, giving us a $1.49 super sticker. Thanks, Edgar. Appreciate that. And I know talent. I put Twin and Terror together. Interesting. Okay. So we have 2 content creators, Twin Empire and Terror Dome. And I guess they're doing shows together, and Steve-O was the matchmaker. So that's interesting. So normally I don't blame the refs, but anyway, we lose the Super Bowl is bad officiating. We have the same crew. Last Super Bowl, yeah, we have I'm blanking on his name now all of a sudden. The old guy, not Clete Blakeman, but
Bill Vinovich, right?
Bill Vinovich, that's it, yeah. And boy, did we get jammed by him in the last one with the 3rd and 15 jet chip loss where Bosa was being held, and Jimmy got hit in the crown of the helmet and his chin, and they didn't call it, and there was a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And, it just Mahomes gets the Brady calls nowadays. And
Mhm.
so this is valid. I mean, I know there's a lot of Ravens fans saying they felt like they got some bad officiating, whether it was there was a pretty blatant pass interference on Zay Flowers that was uncalled.
Yeah.
And I think there was like Kelsey hit someone and then they hit him back. And, that's always the way in the NFL, though. Like the second guy to swing
Gets
always
the
gets
flag. Yeah.
the flag. But, and I wish I'd watched more of the game. My son's fourth birthday, well, one of his birthdays, because you had like the one with the classmates, with the friends. And then last night we had the one with the family. But the one with the friends was, partially during the AFC Championship game. So I was like watching the first 3 touchdowns on my phone. And then even when I got home and could have watched more of the game, I went to go look at a bike because I'm trying to get a bike to chase him around. You just learn how to pedal. And the first thing a kid does is get on the pump track and start doing jumps. I'm like, holy smokes, I'll have to get out there and have some fun with them. So I'm definitely in the market looking for like a dirt jumper or maybe a full suspension that can kind of do that pump track stuff plus trails. But I don't know, we'll see. But I've been talking a lot. Let's let you get in here.
Yeah. Going back to just the matchups in general, I think you kind of hit it right on the head. This Chiefs offense is not nearly as dynamic as the one from 2019, right? They don't have the Legion of Zoom anymore. They don't have Tyreek and, all these speedy, fast wide receivers that can take it to the house any play. But their defense isn't a liability anymore, right? It's not the same as the 2019 Chiefs defense that was, bottom of the NFL Mahomes' rookie year and kind of, mild at best in that playoff run to the Super Bowl. Like this is a legit top 5 defense by the Chiefs and probably top 10 offense by the Chiefs. I mean, I would just say just with Mahomes and Kelsey and Rice coming on and Pacheco, like that's a pretty solid core. Andy Reid, obviously a great play caller. So I like I said earlier, like I just see it going back and forth. I could see it either way. I could see, the Niners getting the better of Patrick Mahomes, but I could also see, that Mahomes playoff magic tends to come alive in the playoffs and in the big moments. And he's a guy that has, I think, been doubted for a lot of this playoff game, right? I think a lot of people thought Miami was going to outscore them. A lot of people thought they were going to lose in Buffalo. A lot of people thought they were going to lose in Baltimore to the, likely the MVP of the season. And their defense shut down all 3. I mean, their defense was phenomenal in all 3 of those games. And, I think that obviously the 49ers have good weapons. They have CMC, they have Ayuk, they have Debo, they have Kittle, they have Jenkins. But, at the same time, I think the Kansas City has faced quite a few really good offenses, and they've, shut them out. Not literally, but for the most part, they've put up really, really good performances. So
other than the Bills was pretty close, right?
The Bills was super close, but even then they only gave up 24 to a really good Josh Allen team.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like, a seesaw where it's like, yeah, the defense gets better and the offense gets a little worse, but at the end of the day, they're still a Super Bowl caliber team, right? They've still been to 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls. They still have won 2 of those Super Bowls. Like they're still an elite football team, even if, they're getting older, even if Travis Kelce's kind of potentially playing his last game of his career next week. He's still Travis Kelce. He's still going to probably have a big game. For whatever reason, Andy Reid can scheme open, Sky Moore or, whatever name your wide receiver for here. He's going to find a way to get that guy in the end zone somehow. Like I think Pacheco's a big one. I think Pacheco could potentially have a good day just because, based off of what Gibbs did, based off of what Monty did. I think, like you said last time, the rushing defense is good because of that lack of volume more so than
because
their
people were
actual
behind.
ability to stop the run. I think we saw that with the Lions. The Lions are a top 5 rushing team in the NFL because they have 2 legit 1,000-yard guys. And especially in that first half, they were averaging like 7 yards a carry. I mean, every single time it seemed like Gibbs or Monty touched the ball, they were going for 5, 6, 7, if not, bigger plays and bigger chunks. And, we kind of got away from that in the second half. I think, again, that momentum where it's like, hey, you just gave up 14 points in 8 minutes. You're tied now. You kind of have to move back into the passing game a little bit. I think a little bit of it is just on Ben Johnson moving away from the run a little too early. But, even in the second half, like the runs weren't that bad. Like the Lions were still running the ball relatively efficiently. They still got some nice chunks out of the rushing attack. They just weren't able to do it as much because they went from being up 17 to being tied in like 10 minutes of game clock. And they kind of had to move back towards the pass a bit, which I think played more into the 49ers' favor. But
I think also being so successful at passing in the first half lulled you into a little bit of false sense of security with the pass.
Yeah, for sure.
Against us, to where, it was almost good that you guys had so much success early that it didn't show you what you were up against. And someone also made an interesting point, and see what you think of this, that, Kyle maybe could have made some adjustments before halftime to help us do a little bit better, some of the stuff we did in the second half, but he waited because then that way you couldn't adjust to what we did during the half. And then there was no, extended break like a halftime to adjust once you saw what we were doing in the second half. I thought that was interesting. I don't know what to think of it, but I thought it was an interesting theory at least.
Yeah, no, the Lions have been a pretty bad third quarter team for most of the year. For whatever reason, they dominate in the first half, they go into halftime, and they come out in the third quarter. And like, I don't know if it's just the fact that the other team adjusts better, if that's just a weakness of Ben Johnson's game, if it's just, they just lose some energy at halftime. I'm not entirely sure, but the entire season that's been a talking point for the Lions. And it's like, you come out of the second half so incredibly flat. And even if you go in up 10, up 17, up 14, you come out, after the first drive, it's a 7-point game. It's a 1-score game. It's a tie game. They just look a lot more flat coming out of halftime. And I don't think they necessarily were flat in this game against the 49ers. I just think, some bad luck went their way that kind of killed the momentum. So even though they came out and they drove down the field in their first offensive drive, that turnover on downs really just kind of took all the air out of their all the wind out of their sails. And I think it's really hard to get back up to speed now that the Niners were rolling and the Lions were kind of falling off.
And the Jahmyr Gibbs fumble.
And the Jahmyr Gibbs fumble just added more to that. Again, literally the only fumble of his career. That one stings a lot. But yeah, I think, based off of last week, watching the 49ers pretty closely, I've watched that game a couple times since. I think Isaiah Pacheco could potentially have a big game just because I think, the Chiefs have a pretty solid offensive line, even without Tooney. I know Creed Humphrey is really, really good. Our guards were opening up some pretty good holes in the running game. Graham Glasgow, I thought, actually had a really good game versus the Niners offense or defensive line. There was a lot of good running lanes. I think Pacheco is, not quite in that Jahmyr Gibbs category, but I think he's just as explosive, if not more, than David Montgomery, who had quite a good day himself. I think the rushing attack could certainly hurt. I think that with Rashid Rice, especially in the playoffs, being better, the Chiefs are not, the team that lost to the Raiders on Christmas where they threw like a pick six and a defensive touchdown in back-to-back drives, right? Yeah. They're not really struggling on offense anymore. They've kind of figured out how to work their guys to the best of their abilities, and their defense has been carrying them the entire season. So you give that elite defense even a mediocre top 15, top 10 offense, and you're kind of in business if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. But I don't say that necessarily to put down the 49ers either. I think they have a formula that works. I think Kyle Shanahan is a very good offensive mind in his own right. I think CMC could have a big day. I think, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel were really good. I know George Kittle was really quiet in the NFC Championship game, but he could very much have a great day versus Kansas City. It's a lot of back and forth, right? I think that they both match up pretty well. They're in the Super Bowl, so obviously they're two very good teams at playing football. There's not a whole lot of bad football being played at this point in the year, but just kind of go back and forth. And I think I really agree with what you said is like, yeah, the offense is not nearly as potent as 2019, but the defense is significantly improved. And I think it's hard to say that they're better than that 2019 team just because that 2019 team was so high scoring and so explosive and so difficult to beat. But I think they're almost more balanced as a football team now, which could potentially make it harder to beat them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pacheco, all things equal, like you said, I think Gibbs is a better, more explosive back than Pacheco. But all things equal, Pacheco's got Mahomes as his quarterback, which again is going to keep a safety out of the box, and one of the guys in the box has to spy him, which we don't see as much with Goff. A couple, maybe you too. I'm not sure, Anthony. Again, I talked to 3 Lions creators, but seemed pretty prevalent that people didn't really trust Goff to throw the deep ball. And I think we saw it on one of those trick plays where the guy was open and Goff just couldn't get it. Goff was able to step into it. He just couldn't get him the ball. It just kind of fluttered and fell short. So like I was saying, all things equal, Pacheco should do better against us because obviously the O-line is not equal. I think the Lions O-line is much better than the Chiefs. But other than that, the Mahomes factor may more than make up for that. We'll see.
Yeah.
Interesting. Steve said after Cowboys, I think he meant after Campbell's 2-point attempts from the game. Is it weird if he gets the coach of the year?
I don't think so.
I thought it would be D'Amico Ryans all along.
So I've had a lot of people talk about that 2-point conversion. It's like, well, yeah, obviously you convert the first one and it's called back, which is really stupid. And we've talked a lot, Lions fans especially, have talked a lot about that play and how if Brett Allen had heard the play correctly and heard, Decker correctly, then the things he brought up in the postgame wouldn't have mattered, because if Decker was the eligible receiver, then everybody would have been lined up correctly. So everybody that kind of comes in like, oh, well, it was, an ineligible formation or whatever, it would not have been if Decker had been declared eligible properly. But then there's a lot of people that come back and they're like, okay, but then you went for it on 2nd and 7, or, not 2nd and 7, but from the 7-yard line from goal to go, right? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you kick the extra point to go to overtime? You get that break with Micah Parsons jumping offside. Why wouldn't you kick the field goal? Like, it seemed like that was the universe telling you to tie the football game up. But I've always looked at that game kind of as like, the Lions the week before had won the NFC North. They had a chance to go to Dallas and make a statement win. And regardless of if that play is converted or not, you showed on primetime television that you can go toe-to-toe with the 2 seed, that you can go toe-to-toe with a really good Dallas team. So I think at that point, with the division already locked up, with a playoff spot already secured, with at that point in the season, pretty much the 3 seed already in line, right? It was, if the Lions win out, they can win the 1 seed. But if they don't win out, they're pretty much stuck at the 3 seed. But you could not get any worse than the 3 seed. So a lot of people bring that up, and I always look at that and I'm saying, well, if they had won that game, they would have been tied with the 49ers for the 1 seed. And obviously they wouldn't have rested their starters at that point in week 17, but you go in there and the Lions are now a 13-win team and they are the 2 seed and potentially get different matchups in the NFL in the NFL playoffs. So I don't necessarily hate the fact that they went for it, because I think Dan Campbell was looking for a statement win. I think he was looking for that, hey, we're going to, be who we are. If we lose the game, so be it. We're the 3 seed in the NFC. And if we win, if we go for this and we convert, which again, Ben Johnson called a really good play and Jared Goff just didn't quite execute, didn't quite get the ball to James Mitchell. If they convert that play, it's an amazing play. It's, such a great play call. It's what a great head coach. And, the result of the play obviously matters a lot, but in the end game and kind of the grand season, I guess, that play didn't really come back to bite the Lions. There was no real negative effects to losing that game outside of, the 2 seed versus the 3 seed. So that play never really bothered me very much.
Makes sense. I hear your logic, and I can completely understand. Randy says Dan Gamble. I said that on the timeline. I said Dan Gamble crapped out. But like I said, that was before I gave it some more thought about how Badgley wasn't exactly Mr. Automatic.
Right.
And so you can't beat him up too much for going for it when, you can't really just automatically say those points are going to go right up on the board. And again, if they did go up on the board, things could have played out differently after that as well, too. So, one thing I was going to mention too, real quick, just to go back to Edgar Ascoli with the super sticker. He was my first super sticker. So when I got that first level of monetization where you get super chats and super stickers and channel memberships, Edgar, I'll never forget, was my first super sticker. So that was cool. So thanks for being my most recent too, Edgar. I appreciate it. Yeah. So Randy says, always take the points. That made me famous in Shifty's live streams. There you go. I like it.
Yeah.
Cheers, Randy. Says I'm too old. I take field goals, punt on fourth, go for it on fourth if absolutely necessary. I got to say, when we drafted Moody, one thing I said was, he's got a big leg. You probably won't be able to count on him like Robbie Gould. But, you can at least go for long field goals with him. And if you don't trust him quite as much on those like 40-plus yarders, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe go for it more. And Kyle definitely went for it more this year, and I like that. I'm a little more aggressive than Randy, despite I think we're pretty similar ages. I'm 53. So I definitely like to go for it. I mean, maybe not as much as Dan Campbell, but more than Kyle in years past. More like he did a lot of the season. I was pretty happy with Kyle this season, going for it more. And then same with 2 points, better be necessary. Yeah, I think unless you have a really great power back or a super mobile QB who just can kind of run it in if all else fails. Yeah, I can kind of see that too. Does Dan Campbell go for a lot of 2-point conversions as well as fourth?
Not really. I mean, like obviously the one in Dallas they did, which they didn't necessarily need to, but like I said earlier, at that point, if you tie the game and go to overtime, winning that game and losing that game doesn't really outcome the season. So I think he was looking for that statement win. He was looking to end the game right there with the knockout punch. It didn't work. But if the game was truly on the line, right, if there was playoffs on the line, if there was, there was the difference between, hey, that field goal could put you in the playoffs, or that extra point could tie the game, and that game winning, if we had lost Minnesota the week prior, winning that game in Dallas would have put us in the playoffs and, clinched our spot. I think if that is the situation, Dan would have kicked the field goal and gone to overtime. But I think because they really didn't have a whole lot to lose, I think Dan Campbell was a little more aggressive than he necessarily needed to be. But there are not too many times this season where I remember Dan Campbell going for 2 unless it was, necessary, unless mathematically it made more sense. He did that a little bit in year 1, especially, when we were obviously losing a lot of games. I think try to swing as much momentum as possible. But especially the last 2 years, there really haven't been that many 2-point conversions off of it.
I'll tell you when I like going for 2 is when you're down by 7 and you score a TD late in the game and there's no time for anything else to happen in the game. Go for 2 and win it, and just don't go to overtime, or either do or don't. But,
right,
win or lose, but just get it over with right then, and not subject your guys to more punishment and a coin flip and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, I don't know. That's one time I do like the 2-point. Who's a really big 2-point coach is Sean Payton. At least I know when we played down there in 2019, he went for it a few times in that game. I think it kind of ended up costing them. But I want to say the Ravens are a big 2-point conversion team too, even though they have Justin Tucker, which is weird.
Yeah,
but that I'm not as sure about it. It's a feeling I have more than assuredness. What else? Randy says probability is fun to predict, but I took statistics 3 times in college. It's risky. Stats is tough. I remember stats was brutal, and econometrics, man. I was an econ major, and that's some seriously advanced math in those classes. And I struggled. I passed, but boy, did I struggle with both of those classes for sure. Calculus was brutal on me too. I dropped it a few times throughout my college career, and it really never stuck for me until it was business calc, and then it was about money. And funny enough, when it's about money, it made more sense. I could like relate to the first and second derivatives and all that crazy stuff. So if you're struggling with calc, folks, try biz calc. If you like money, maybe like me, maybe it'll help you. Let's see here. These guys are having a blast here. Was Belichick who started this all because Brady and their dominance, or was it somebody else that are going for it on fourth?
Maybe it's bias, and I feel maybe it is. I truly think the NFL started going for 4th down more when Dan Campbell took over as coach in 2022 or 2020. I truly think he influenced the NFL that much because, the first game he ever coached was against the 49ers, and that very first drive on 4th and 1, they went for it. Like early in the game, midfield, and they went for it and they converted. And, it didn't work every time. The Niners obviously won that game, but the Lions put up 31. And I think that first year with Dan Campbell being so aggressive and, I guess the logic a lot of Lions fans use, and it's a pretty common thing up here, is like, if you go for it 3 times, you have to be successful once to, essentially average out, right? If you pass up 2 field goals, you're missing 6 points. But then if you go for it on the 3rd time and you get that 7, you're at +1. You know what I mean? So you don't have to convert every time for it to be effective. If you convert, 2 out of every 3, even if you convert 1 out of every 3, you're still in a positive point differential. So that's kind of been Dan Campbell's philosophy. And that seems to be, at least in my opinion, maybe it's just because that's what my coach started doing and I noticed it a lot more around the NFL. But it seems like 2020 is kind of when people started going for it more, where all the statistics were like, maybe you should go for it on 4th and 1 at the opponent's 40, right? In that little no man's land. Maybe that is a good idea. And I think Campbell, if he didn't create it, I think he definitely popularized it.
So basically, you're saying the Lions lost because they only went for it twice on 4th down.
Yeah, they should have gone for it third time is what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Third time, they get the 7 and win the game. There you go.
Exactly. See, it would have worked out. The math.
Causation versus correlation.
The math. That's all I'm saying.
It's always fun. No, it makes perfect sense. I agree. Team Cali was saying, I'm surprised the Ravens stopped running the ball. The running back and Lamar both. Yeah, that was very surprising, especially considering I think the Chiefs defense is the one place where the Chiefs defense is a little bit weak is against the run. They're very good against the pass. Chris Jones is a great pass rusher. Snead, McDuffie, all those guys are great in coverage, but they can be had running. I want to say they're 28th.
As far as yards per game, they are 17th in the NFL as a defense.
17. Okay, so average.
Yeah.
Okay, but on a defense that I think they're saying is top 5 defense overall for the Chiefs, maybe even
pretty top 3. Kansas City is ranked the number 2 defense behind Baltimore.
Wow, that's crazy.
1 ahead of the 49ers.
That's crazy. Yeah, so on a number 2 defense to have the number 17 run D, that means their pass D is elite, there. Yep. Elite. No doubt. Let's see what they're just saying. Why they stop? It's a good question. Why do the 49ers stop running sometimes when we're running the ball well, and Kyle just decides to start throwing like in the Super Bowl?
We have that problem too. Ben Johnson does that too often, where we're averaging like 5 yards a carry. And he's like, let's throw it on 1st down, and
happened versus us.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's trick plays. What was the? Where'd they come from?
Those were kind of sick. I'm not gonna lie. Those were kind of awesome.
You're right. It was execution.
Because Reynolds was behind the safety, and then Jalen was behind the corner. So if Jared Goff hits those 2, I mean it's an execution thing. Ben Johnson got his guys in positions to succeed. They just didn't execute.
That's true. But man, I mean, they were like 3rd and was it like 3rd and 20? Were you guys 3rd and 21? You guys converted on or something crazy in the first half to.
Maybe. I guess I'm on
Raw. I mean, I feel like there was a monster 24, 24. It was something insanely long. I know there was like a 3rd and 18 or 14. It was wild. Wild. There's some really long runs on as well. Just tearing us up. Taking the ball first. Who started that? I kind of agree. I play a lot of. That was another thing from my article. As I said, the Lions loved it because I think you guaranteed that they would take the ball if you won the toss.
Yep.
And I said, well, then you guys are starting with the ball because we love to defer. And sure enough,
that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I think Randy, it's because they trust their offense more than their defense. And they're kind of like us. The Lions are kind of a front running team where they do better when they have a lead than if they're like playing from behind or in a evenly, back and forth game, if you will.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
I had that in the article as well too. So does anyone else notice if that's the case in the NFL? Well, I noticed divisional weekend that the Packers and the Texans both took the ball and they both lost. And the Lions took the ball and lost, which is kind of interesting. against the Packers, we're like, oh, look at this. We're going to get the ball to end the half, the ball to come out in the second half, and Moody gets a kick blocked to end the first half against Green Bay. And then we go 3-and-out to start the second half. We end up getting 0 points in our back-to-back possessions. Our coveted, prized possession. Everybody's like, well, I wonder if Kyle will, change his tune after seeing that. Some of the content creators were saying that. I'm like, I was in the show and I'm like typing in. I'm like, the Packers won the toss, man. Like Kyle had no decision in the Green Bay game or this game as to who started with the ball.
Yeah.
So, makes sense. Kyle keeps you guessing when you should run. He passes vice versa stuff. Yeah, Kyle gets cute or tries to be the smartest guy in the room, and so like if like the very smart people are saying run, then Kyle's like, well, I'm the smartest, I'm gonna pass, kind of thing.
That's yeah. Speaking as a fan whose head coach used to be a rocket scientist and thought he was the smartest guy in the room, that does not work very well all the time.
Who is that?
Matt Patricia.
Oh, he was a rock. Is that where the pencil behind the ear came from?
Yeah, that's like his whole thing is he's like, well, I'm a rocket scientist. And I was like, we do not care. You can't coach football. It was bad.
How do you feel about him as a DC?
I still don't like him. I still don't like him.
Just nothing. Just get out.
I think we saw with the Eagles. I don't think his system works. He builds very differently from everybody else, where a lot of teams like to build their trenches to the boundary. That's what the Lions are doing right now.
Yeah.
Matt Patricia builds from the boundaries in. So he drafts cornerbacks, but then the problem is there's no pass rush, there's no run stop, there's nothing. And yeah, you got a couple good cornerbacks on the outside, but they're running for 6 yards a gain and the quarterback has 5 seconds to throw every time. It doesn't matter who your DBs are because they're going to have to cover for 5-6 seconds at a time. So
yeah, you got to stop the run first in the NFL.
It's a weird philosophy and it does not work.
Run all over you. Yeah, I was at a different kid's birthday party on Saturday, and Patricia is kind of an example of, they were saying, oh, we were flying in from Denver and we got stuck on the tarmac for 2 or 3 hours. And guess who was in first class? But Mike Shanahan. And it's like people were like walking by with their phone, like videoing him, like, oh, I got video of Mike Shanahan or whatever. And I was like, it's amazing to look at his coaching tree with basically, I guess now 6 branches with Raheem Morris being hired by Atlanta. Because you got Kyle, you got McVay, you got LaFleur, you got McDaniel, Saleh, and now
D'Amico.
Oh, D'Amico too, and then and now Raheem Morris too, going to Atlanta, and maybe there's 7. But and then you look at Belichick's tree, and it's like bare. There's no branches at all. Like everybody who's left, they fell on their face. A lot of them came back, and just haven't really ever done anything, which is kind of interesting. If he's supposed to be this great coach, which I think he's great. I just don't think he's as great as people give him credit because he never did anything before Brady or since. So
yeah,
that hurts his legacy some for sure. Randy says, so Detroit took the ball first, but they didn't have the higher time of possession. It's probably just because of the short drives in the second half, the fumble.
Yeah. Yep.
And throwing the ball so much in the second half, I'm sure hurt that as well too. Everybody's saying hi. That surprises me. Let's see. It says Kyle gets lost in his own head, like that movie, The Cell. I don't think I've seen that one. Does anybody else think Kyle plays chess? 4D chess, I like to say. I don't know. He was the reason the Lions was held back. He also destroyed the Eagles' defense.
Yeah. Matt Patricia had a negative impact for a while.
Did he destroy the Lions' defense? I mean,
oh yeah.
Or was it injuries too?
Nope, it was Patricia.
Howie Roseman.
Nope, I fully believe it was Matt Patricia. They were pretty good. I mean, they were under call, though they were fine. Like they weren't great, but they weren't bad. And Matt Patricia came in and he pointed at Darius Slay, the all-pro corner, and said, "Get lost." He pointed at the team captain and team safety Glover Quinn, said, "Get out of my building." He traded Quandre Diggs to the Seahawks for like a 6th-round pick. He, gutted the secondary and just like we had 3 Pro Bowlers on that secondary.
Lions defense. But he's saying that
Yeah.
he destroyed the Eagles defense because remember he took
I
over
got
for
you.
Desai late in the year.
I
don't
got
feel
you.
like the Eagles defense was
I
ever
think
that
that
great.
one.
I think it was more
partially
Roseman who
bet on old
let
corners.
Hargrave walk, TJ Edwards walk, CJ Gardner Johnson go to you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I mean, all their linebackers wasn't just TJ Edwards, but TJ Edwards was the best. He did a lot of good things for the Browns.
Yeah,
I
think
the Bears.
as Howie bet on 32-year-old cornerbacks Darius Slay and James Bradbury.
Yeah,
it's it's a big risk, and it didn't work out for Howie. But I don't think Matt Patricia's system necessarily puts players in positions to succeed. I saw a lot of Eagles people being like, why aren't X, Y, and Z players playing on the defensive line, right? You have Jalen Carter, you have Jordan Davis, you have, I think Milton Williams is his name, like third, second-year defensive tackle, and they were all getting a lot of pressure on the interior, but Matt Patricia kept putting in like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and the old guys that just weren't getting it done anymore. So I don't know how much control he truly had over that personnel, but it seemed like there was still a lot of personnel issues like he had in Detroit, and just the scheme in general not doing a whole lot. So, but I think I would say more on Howie Roseman gambling on 30-year-old corners than.
And also on this draft class, which looked really great on paper, but rookies fail 50% of the time if you're doing it well. And then of the 50% that make it, a lot don't make it as rookies. So I shouldn't say rookies, draft picks fail at 50% rate. And then, anyway, they're talking about Andy Reid and Kyle and their sons, or Mike and Kyle versus Andy and his son. That's, we don't need to talk about Andy Reid's son. That's a sad story. And, just don't drink and drive, folks, is the lesson there. But I will say, like, the whole thing about Andy having ownage over Kyle, there's a little bit of that. I mean, he's 3-0 against Kyle, but I would say one of them was before the Niners got good, and also that was the game where Jimmy tore his ACL. I would say one of them, the refs definitely helped in the Super Bowl. And then in 2022, the Chiefs beat us, but that was Jimmy. That was not Brock. I mean, Brock played. He threw an interception late in the game in garbage time, but Brock didn't start. CMC played in the game, but he didn't start. He had only had a practice and a half with us. He got there that Thursday and had like a practice and a walkthrough, or half a practice and a walkthrough. So he didn't know all the plays. So basically in the second half, there was barely any CMC or none late in the game. And then we were like walking wounded in that game. We had Armstead out. Jimmy Ward played with a club on his hand. It was Jimmy Ward's first game of 2022 also, so he was rusty as heck, plus playing one-handed. Bosa and Mooney Ward both had pulled groins. McGlinchey, our right tackle, had a strained calf. I think there were some other – Dre Greenlaw went down early in the second quarter, didn't play the entire second half. So it was hardly the 49ers' best effort. But, the big one is that Andy Reid is 0-0 against Brock Purdy-led 49er teams. And I think that's a really important thing to consider when you're looking at the ownage. And it is 3-0 is ownage. You got to give it to them there. Cool. Let's put Trent or Greenlaw next to Moody during warm-ups. Get them the enforcer, tough guys, toughen them up a little bit. Moody does seem a little soft. I saw him after the Cleveland game, and he looked like he was going to cry. And I was just like, come on, man, just toughen up, son. Toughen up. It's a tough game. Also, he was. It was interesting. I didn't talk about it in shows last week, but somebody posted on the timeline last week about how like Moody might be an op because he grew up as a Detroit Lions fan, growing up in Michigan. And so they were saying like, oh, is he going to miss one kind of on purpose because this is his childhood team? And I never responded or anything. Sometimes when you see things like that, you argue. Sometimes you're just like, I don't even want to call attention to this to even give it publicity. But anyway, Do you guys think if Emmanuel Mosley would have played the whole year, Detroit would have gotten the first seat and won that game in the playoffs at home?
I think it's hard to say. Obviously, Mosley played 5 snaps this year. Just didn't get a sample size, right? I mean, he spent all offseason recovering. He spent all preseason recovering. He spent the first 5 weeks of the year recovering. He finally gets on the field, is told he's going to be limited, is told he's going to, start taking some reps back. And I think 5 coverage snaps, not even 5 total snaps into the game, he tears his ACL for the second year in a row. It's just hard to say. It's hard to tell what kind of player he would be off of the ACL. It's hard to tell, how recovered he was, how much better he could get. It just wasn't a big enough sample size. You guys have obviously seen Mosley play a lot more snaps than we have.
If he got back to 100%, I agree with this.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the free agency signing. I want them to sign him back again, and I want them to keep Mosley until he is healthy and fully gets a shot. Mostly because I don't think he'll be that expensive, and I think that if he does get healthy, he'll be really good. But I just think it's really hard to say because who knows? We all thought Cam Sutton was going to be really good too, and Cam Sutton turned out to be, not the best cornerback in the world. So,
yeah, I figured he'd be solid, but I thought Mosley would be your star, especially Mosley's great in the run fit too.
Yeah, I thought Mosley was going to be cornerback 1, and I thought I still think that Cameron Sutton is still supposed to be a cornerback 2.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's not supposed to be manned up versus CeeDee Lamb and Puka and Evans and all those guys. I think he had a couple punches here and there in the playoffs, but for the most part, that's not the guy you want on wide receiver 1s. That's the guy you want on wide receiver 2s. And I think once the league kind of figured that out, it hurt the Lions. So I think that's going to be their big priority this offseason is either drafting a good rookie corner or signing one or finding a way to put somebody opposite Cameron Sutton that's not named Kendall Vilder that can actually make a play on the football.
There you go. Lions are going to be scary next season and more to come. Honestly, they have some dogs over there. Maybe a new rivalry was born with the 49ers and Lions.
Maybe we'll find out.
I believe in the Lions more than the Cowboys or Eagles. That's for sure.
I think I said this on the night that they lost. I think the Lions are firmly the second best team in the NFC. I think they are a better team than the Cowboys. I think they're a better team than Philly. I think they're obviously better than the Rams or the Bucks or whoever else is in that lower playoff tier. I think the Lions are firmly the second best team in the NFC right now. And I think if they can get a true cornerback 1 and potentially an opposite pass rusher of Aiden Hutchinson, I think they'll be really good for a long time.
I would say your only team you have to fear is in your own division.
The Packers, yeah.
The Packers. Yeah, Jordan Love,
I think the Packers will go back and forth with for quite a while. I'm not as worried about Minnesota. They just because of a quarterback thing, and I just don't think they have the strongest roster built up. And I think Chicago could actually be. I think Minnesota might be the worst team in the division next year.
Interesting.
It's really going to depend, obviously, what Chicago does in free agency in the draft this year. It's going to be.
I had Chicago before the season started. I had them in the playoffs.
Really, I had them at 7 wins, so I was pretty close.
I had the Bears in the playoffs. I had the Packers out of the playoffs. I didn't expect them to be good. I didn't believe in Jordan Love. I had the Niners and Cowboys in the NFC Championship. I had the Chiefs and Bengals in the AFC Championship. And I had Niners Chiefs Super Bowl. It was crazy. And then by the time everything rolled around, I figured it was going to be us and the Ravens. But who knows? I think NFC North is going to be the most powerful conference in the NFC for a while.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Oh, jeez. He's talking about. I said, don't drive drunk, and he said,
get high instead.
High instead. He drives. Randy, come on. There's probably kids watching this. Let's not give the bad impressions. I mean, and Anthony's a young guy. He's in college, so we don't want to be a bad influence on him.
No, I'm not even old enough for that.
Yeah, so there you go. Exactly. Kyle needs to watch 2019 Super Bowl film so you get a feeling of losing, so you won't make the same mistakes. I think Kyle remembers pretty vividly. I get the feeling he's a photographic memory type of guy.
Probably.
And that's all burned in. Moody and his dad are huge fans. Yeah, I'm sure they're happy. Well, obviously Moody went there.
Well, if say considering they're both alumni, I would assume so.
Yeah, exactly. Congrats to the Wolverines on their natty.
Yeah.
Has it been like decided one way or another if like all the cheating accusations are going to overturn any of that, or probably not? Honestly,
It's not. Well, all the cheating stuff was pretty much dealt with when Harbaugh was suspended for 3 games. That was like the punishment that they brought down. I don't think anything's going to be I don't think any drastic measures are going to be taken at all. I think it's pretty much over with.
There you go. Steve was asking what my final ranking was on Purdy. I had him after week 17 against the Commanders. I had him 3 to 6 in the league. And then after week 18, like so many quarterbacks played poorly in week 18. I actually bumped Purdy up after the season, even though Purdy didn't play week 18. I moved him up to 2 to 5 in the league. I think that's both might be a little high. I got him kind of 3 to 6, 4 to 7, somewhere in that range. I mean, I think absolutely Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Burrow are better. And then Rodgers if he can make a full recovery. So that's at least 4 that I think are just better quarterbacks. Lamar might be 2. And Jordan Love is making a case. Obviously not head to head, but let's face it, it's a lot tougher to play the Niners defense than the Packers D. I'm pretty happy with that 3 to 6, 4 to 7 range. But my final was 2 to 5, Steve, just to be literal. The last time I tweeted it was, and I was kind of just doing it to mess with people because people were getting tired of me doing the rankings. So I'm like, oh, hey, you're tired of it? I'm going to do one more just to, even though we didn't play, like, oh, you can't do one when we didn't play. I'm like, oh, watch me, so it's one of those deals. Oh, geez. You can get them, but I think it's difficult to test for. So it also depends on what state you're in. In California, I'd be shocked to see someone get one for weed, but other states might be less forgiving. Screaming, don't take me. If you got the DUI, I guess. In my mind, I'm fucking. I meant don't tase me. Oh, don't tase me. Yeah, nobody wants to get tased. Thanks, Kenny. Appreciate it. Anything else you want to go over? We've been going for an hour and 20. I don't want to keep you too long here. I know.
I mean, I think I'm good. I was gonna say we could just go through the rest of the comments real quick.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think the Lions are better than all of those teams. I think the Packers probably give us the biggest trouble just because of their pass rush and their defense and their ability to get to the quarterback. But I mean, I don't think you can look at another team in the NFC other than the 49ers and be like, that team is definitively better than the Detroit Lions. This was a decade ago. The Spygate was in 2014. That was 10 years ago.
Wow.
That's insane. That's so crazy.
Well, then there was Deflategate after that, right?
That was in 2016.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you heard about this, but Amy Trask is a former Raiders executive, and she said famously in the divisional round, there's 8 terrific quarterbacks, and then there's Brock Purdy. And she didn't say he was bad. She said he's very good. He's just not terrific, which is kind of fair. I mean, but she got roasted by a lot. There's a whole Brock Purdy. I got roasted by him for being a Lance guy in the off season and in the early season because I had called Purdy mid, and I'm like, look, calling a rookie quarterback mid is actually high praise,
right? Especially one that went in the 7th round.
Right, exactly. So anyway, it's just funny the way all these things work out. But she's been getting skewered over this. Of course, now that he's in the Super Bowl, it's even worse because now it's just Patrick Mahomes and Brock Purdy.
Now it's one terrific quarterback in Brock Purdy.
Yes, exactly. And then it'll be Super Bowl champion, no terrific quarterbacks, and Super Bowl champion Brock Purdy, hopefully. Fingers crossed. We'll see.
Fingers crossed.
But yeah, well, Anthony, thanks for coming by. Oh, wait, Rocco got Sentinel. Says still work to be done. Yeah, we still got to get the win, get number 6. It's not going to be easy. Like Anthony and I both said, we both said sort of 50-50. Whoever executes better will probably win. It's going to be a hell of a game, I think. I don't think either team will blow the other one out. And yeah. Hopefully Kyle can reverse the ownage and Purdy can show why it's different with Brock Purdy than with Jimmy G. He definitely has so far this playoffs for sure. I think he's accounted for 73% of our yards getting here so far.
That's crazy, yeah.
And Jimmy was like 29% getting to the Super Bowl with the Chiefs, because against the Vikings he only threw 4 passes attempts in the second half, and 8 against the Packers the next week. So he had 12 pass attempts in the last 6 quarters leading up to that Super Bowl, which is crazy. And obviously Brock kind of put us on his back in both of those against the Packers and the Lions. So real quick, he says Spygate goes back as far as 2000, 2006. Deflategate was 2015. Okay, there we go. Well, thank you for the clarification. But everybody, make sure to check Anthony out. His handle is WriterWrong. His @ is @AnthonyWriter5. And check out his YouTube channel. Give him a like and subscribe as well too. Great Lions fan. He was Lions fan of the year in 2020. He also announced the Amon-Ra St. Brown draft pick at the draft. And great guest last week, and gracious enough to come back this week after the loss. I always offer it up to people before, like when they come on, I'm like, hey, if you want to come back next week, so you're welcome. But like, let's lock it down before the game, because I know me, if we lose, I'm less likely to accept. I have done some where it wasn't locked down before, but I know it's better for both sides if we're just locked down, then you don't have to worry about it. But we didn't, and Anthony volunteered to come back anyway. And so it takes some big balls. Goody, whoever, however you pronounce her name, came back last week, kind of same way for the Packers. And I've had I got Candace Higgins come back from the Seahawks, but it's not super common to have somebody to be big enough to come back and come back on. So much appreciated, man.
Yeah, of course.
Respect, big time.
Anytime.
All right. Well, anything you got going on this week that you want to publicize to people, get the word out about?
Not a whole lot. I got a couple of videos going up right now, but they're all Lions related. Nothing really else about the 49ers. I got a video that went up about 30 minutes ago that I'm working on, and a couple other projects throughout the week, and obviously a lot of draft content throughout the off season. So, I mean, if you're interested in draft content, that's pretty much what my off season consists of. It's obviously related to the Lions, but it's also more of just a broad spectrum of like, hey, here's this player, he's really good, here's why he's really good, and then at the end, like, this is how he'd fit with the Lions. So if you can skip that last part, it's pretty uniform for any fan base looking.
I was going to say, if you like them, they could be a fit for anyone, just depending on the position and the traits, right?
Yep.
Well, later today, I have First and Ted, my weekly show with Aaron from Partners First Takes. That's at 3:30 in about an hour. 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern. Tomorrow on Thursday, I have Lexi coming on from the Chiefs. It'll be my first Chiefs Behind Enemy Lines episode. She'll be on at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. And then I got my usual Mike in the Man Cave, the Browns fan I was telling you about. We do 2 Pacific, usually 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. And then Friday at 3, I've got Ballin' with Bash and Ted, Bashar from 49er Minded. That's our weekly show. But I'd probably be some more Chiefs fans sprinkling in this week and next week. I've got a lot of feelers out, and hopefully some people sometimes it's hard to coordinate because I do so much during business hours, and a lot of people work all day and then need to do things in the evenings. And on evenings and weekends, I'm usually on daddy duty. So it makes it tougher sometimes for coordination. But I'm sure I'll get 3-4 in before the Super Bowls. And again, Anthony, thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. And I'll just say peace and go Niners, and best of luck to your Lions here in the offseason.
Appreciate it. Good luck in the Super Bowl.
Thanks, buddy.